Well, I would start off by saying that your genius instructor, whoa, disappeared for a minute. Your genius instructor forgot to push record on our meeting this afternoon or this morning for you. So I will re-record it without the audience. And so it'll take a little less time. Won't have the interaction and all the fun that that brings along, but it'll have the basic meat of the thing anyway. And we'll get the point across. How about that? So let me go ahead and share the screen and we'll get cranked up and going. Okay. Um, this is the second week of our second program in the Ignite Managers program focusing on applications. And Father, I apologize for forgetting to push the record button and eliminating the live portion of it with the interactions and all the fun that brings. But I pray you bless this time together and allow people to grasp hold of things that can help them be the best they can be to advance your kingdom and to glorify you. And I ask in Jesus' name. So, uh, but I want to start off with a little side note here that I should have done last week and I didn't do it, is that this is the second semester. The content of this course I built to be a second semester of what I would teach in a second semester management course. The first semester would be a principles of management course that would include the basic foundations and overview of the management field. And we did that last year. Okay. Now this is what I would do for the second semester for the management majors. The other one's for everybody in the business school. This one is for management majors to provide them with a little deeper foundation in some of those things. So we'll build off the things we did before, but also it's built on the foundation of what I would teach in a second semester. Now, what I did was I left off the theories and the diagrams, the boxes and the arrows and all those kinds of things that we would find in a textbook, but the basic content and the applications are what we focus on. So as far as understanding what it's all about, it's the same stuff you'd get in a management second semester organizational behavior course versus the book things that we're not using a book anyway. So, but I gotta say, I go every week when I'm preparing these, I go to a textbook or two and build into the content for the week off of what the concepts and the principles of that are, but then add an applied twist to it so we can take it and build on it and put it to use. We don't want to just be spouting off things for the sake. One of the big challenges we have in education is making things real for people, giving them things that they can take out of the classroom and put to work, and especially difficult in a college setting because the people that I was teaching primarily usually wouldn't use the things that I taught them for several years, if any, if ever. And so I'd always try to include some very practical things, and I would tell them these are things today in this class session we'll talk about that you can actually take out of the classroom today and put to work. But it was still kind of frustrating because a lot of stuff had to do with organization principles and strategies and those kinds of things. And they didn't have, if they were in a club or something or some extracurricular program, they might be able to put some of those things to use. But they weren't setting the policy and the standards for those courses anyway, or for those activities anyway. So, but this is a lot of fun because I get to share it with people who actually do have a place to use it, and so we make it a very hands-on kind of a thing versus the sort of pie in the sky thing that the classroom will typically do. So we will um, get cranked off. We started off asking how many people have been making your beds in the morning, and the consensus was that people were trying, but continuing to keep asking people about it as we go through. It takes about 3 months to develop a habit. And so we'll work on developing a habit, not because I think I want to be a old hen sitting on a nest of eggs and hoping they'll hatch, but uh, the idea came to me when I was listening to Dr. Wayne talk about uh, setting some standards and having some structure and some organization and doing things, the little things at a high level and a high quality. And when I heard him say that, this was just a couple of weeks ago. When I heard him say that, it kind of clicked in me that we've got a place we can start off with that. So if we want to change the world, start by making your bed in the morning. So, and I'm definitely dealing with people that I believe are world changers. And so we'll start building uh changing the world right here and right now. This during this course. So I'll keep asking about that. So, but the first phrase I want to start off with this week is you find what you're looking for. Because it's human nature to notice things that are different or out of place. Typically, when we're kind of scanning around, kind of seeing what's going on in the world, the things that don't fit are the things that are grab our attention, the things that we see, the things that kind of raise their little hands and say, here I am, here I am. And so before anything else we see, we'll see problems. We'll see things that don't measure up. We'll see things that are out of order and those kinds of things. They tend to pop out unless we live in chaos and we can't find anything. What that tends to lead to is trying to correct things. We get in this mentality of always correcting things because those are the things we see. So we get in this mentality of correcting things. So if we're working with other people, we see them do something that's not quite right, we try to correct it, and somebody else is doing something that's not doesn't fit exactly, we try to correct that. And we get to a mentality of discouragement. People start getting discouraged because they can't ever do anything right. Every time we open our mouths, we're gonna try to correct them on something. They never can measure up, they never can fit in, and they just get really frustrated and discouraged, which is exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. We should be building people up. So that's part of it, because we don't want morale to drop, or we don't want them to get bad attitudes and start resisting our or undermining our leadership because they don't really trust us anymore. Uh, but the other thing is when we get some idea in our mind, something that we tend to kind of latch on to, something we hear a lot, then we see that everywhere we go. Now, for example, in a street ministry, if we hear hellfire and damnation preaching all the time, when we go out to the street to minister to people, instead of looking for redemption and trying to bring people to grace and to peace and an intimate relationship with a loving Father and our loving Lord Jesus, we will tend to try to pick on their problems. You shouldn't dress like that. You shouldn't look like that. You should put clothes over your body. The drugs and the alcohol, they're killing you. Let me help you deal with that problem. Well, that's not what we're there for. We're there to try to set them on a different pathway, not to change their behaviors, not to correct something, because that's the Lord's job. Okay, but trying to set them in a place of walking out a relationship with Jesus. So if we find ourselves in a situation where we're looking for that, we hear that all the time, we hear the negativity all the time, we start looking for that, then when we get out and start ministering to people, that's what we begin to look for in them and try to correct them too. Now, honestly, the preachers that are preaching that shouldn't be preaching all that kind of stuff continuously. We don't need to be forgetting that that's the reality. But the thing is that we need to be focusing on, as the scripture says, looking to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, not looking to the problems. Okay. Scripture says, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are good, pure, honest, of good report, any virtue, any praise, think on these things. And other scriptures agree with that we need to set our minds on things above. We need to set our minds and our thoughts on life and on edifying. Let all things be done to edifying, not on the correction, building up, not chipping away. Okay. So, but we need to be intentional about the things that we're looking for. Um, Another way to kind of look at that is whatever we focus on becomes bigger. Okay. When we tend to zone in on a certain kind of a thing, then that becomes the biggest issue. If we had a problem with with the way a crowd in a certain city responded to something we did, we'll start looking at that. And we'll start looking for that in the next city we go to. And all of a sudden in that city, we're kind of looking for that same problem. Now, the really problem side of that, where that really becomes a serious issue, is we're focusing on that particular issue, that particular situation, and that kind of consumes our whole mentality. Okay. Dr. Wayne put it this way: what the heresy is when a truth becomes the truth, because we begin to focus on something that gets bigger and bigger in our minds, and we forget about everything else and focus on this one particular thing. Some examples in the secular world are ideas like diversity and equity and discrimination and those kind of things. They're absolutely great. They're absolutely scriptural, biblical to embrace diversity, to embrace equity, to not discriminate on things that don't matter. Okay, well, what do we now? Let's back up on this discrimination thing. Discrimination really is a critical thing. We're always making decisions, and every decision is a discrimination between this versus that. Do we want the big potatoes? We want the small potatoes. Let's find the big ones for bacon. So we're going to bake potatoes. We need big ones. Which ones of the small potato we don't want to use right now? So we're discriminating between potatoes. Who's the fastest runner? We're putting together a track team, and so who's the fastest runner? We want to put in these races, and who's the best long distance runner? We want to put in those races. We're discriminating based upon their capabilities, and those are all important things to do. But what we don't want to do is say, I'm going to put this guy in this place because he's lighter skinned or darker skinned or taller or shorter or whatever else. Things that don't matter, things that they can't help, that really don't have any bearing on what we're doing. Those are the things we don't want to discriminate on. In the United States, we have a lot of laws about the things that we cannot discriminate on. We cannot discriminate by law on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, pregnancy, age, or disability. And because those are things that are basically a person's individual characteristics that they can't help. What we can't discriminate on is their performance levels. What we can discriminate on is what they contribute, what they bring to the table, and how they put that to work for us. And so those are all positive things. But if we begin to focus on diversity, and that becomes the thing that we really zone in on, then it becomes bigger, and everything becomes a diversity issue. And so people, when we have a group of people and we see somebody who's different from everybody else, we try to advance that person, try to promote that person. We try to give that person an extra space. We try to give them more resources. We try to give them better attention, better training, whatever they need. And so then all of a sudden, diversity, that is a good thing when we have this diverse group that has where people bring a lot of different kind of things to the table for us. Then all of a sudden, we perverted that and made it a heresy by focusing on diversity so hard that everything has become a diversity issue. The United States, we're having serious problems with that. That's part of the reason that Trump was elected, was because he's saying, our nation and our corporations have focused so hard on diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI, that it's really distorting our purposes. And we're promoting people who shouldn't be promoted because they haven't been able to contribute anything, but we promote them and give them advantages because of their race, because of their sexual orientation, because of their age, because of whatever else. It doesn't really have anything to do with what our organization actually needs and what we actually do. And so, sure, we want to give them opportunities. Absolutely. If we have some disadvantaged people who haven't been able to find the opportunities, let's find ways to help them to find the opportunities and let's get them set up for taking advantage of those opportunities. But to give them a promotion or position, some students at a high school in California were told last fall that trans trans people have more rights than cisgender people. People who see themselves as having a different gender than their birth sex have more rights than people who just follow a straight path through their gender identity and their sexual identity being the same thing. I'm a male, I have male things, and so I'm going to act like a male. I'm a female, I have female things, I'm going to act like a female. But it's the people who diverge from that. You say, I may have the male things, but I think I'm a woman. What the students are being told is those people have more rights, which is absolute against the law from federal law on down. It's absolutely untrue. But that's what they were told, and people are making a decision. But anyway, whatever we focus on becomes bigger use. So we're going to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. All of a sudden, it's gotten distorted and perverted uh, to where it is not the original meaning, whatever. It's become a secular heresy. Okay. A truth has become the truth. Okay. So, some things we can do about that. First off, live by the scriptures. Whatsoever things are lovely, good, pure, honest, of good report. Think on these things. Keep our eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Okay. Second, be intentional about what we think. Be intentional about what we think and what we look for. Uh, Develop a habit, and it can be difficult to do. Develop a habit of looking for things to praise. Dr. Wayne is great at that. He may make a correction again now and then, but usually the correction is the last thing. Usually he'll provide vision. He'll talk about capabilities and standards and goals and purposes and destinies. And then if we don't get the hint, then he may come in and say, well, let's think about making this adjustment. But then he'll end up always praising too, and always encouraging. He's the most encouraging guy I've ever been around, especially for pastors for some reason. Pastors tend to be insecure, but we'll leave that one on the table. But be intentional about what we look for. Then another suggestion, make a practice of finding one thing. I heard of a guy one time who every day going to work, he'd make two decisions. First decision, what was he going to look for today that people were doing right? Now, there's a lot of things they'll be doing right, but he was going to make sure that he focused on one thing, intentionally focused on one thing that they were doing right. And when he found that, then the second decision was, what am I going to do about it? So it can be anything from a good job, a thank you, I saw you do that and I like that, or just a pat on the back and a wink of the eye or whatever that says that gives them some positive feedback. It could be buy them a Coke, buy them a coffee, take them to lunch. If it's the whole work group that does something great, then give them a dinner or something. It doesn't really matter, because when we do something intentionally for people and we recognize them, we get a lot of mileage out of that. People, and we'll talk more about this when we talk about motivation, but it is one of those powerful things we can do to get people's hearts on our side, not just their hands, but their hearts as well. Uh, so to be intentional about it, okay. Uh, Another common saying, the cream rises to the top, okay. And now the point of this one is for us is that diligence pays off for you. If you have high standards, if you work to develop your capabilities, uh, things will be better for you. Okay. You will tend to write if you develop good qualities and develop good qualities in the people that look up to you, life gets 1,000% easier for you. Okay. So how do we do that? We talked about this some on our last program, and I want to reiterate, I want to hit on these things again. Okay. Um, and that is a leader has 4 key responsibilities. If they're doing anything besides this, they need to be sure it's something that needs to be done, because a lot of times leaders do things that really don't help. They're things often that other people could do and should do. Often they're just kind of diversions or make work things to kind of because they need a mental vacation or a little break or whatever else, a justification for spending time with something that's that people aren't watching so closely or whatever. So 4 things that leaders need to do. Their 4 primary responsibilities. Number 1 is to cast vision. Casting vision is a continual and evolutionary process. Casting vision is something that tends to grow. If you look back at Abraham, when God was casting a vision of his covenant with Abraham, beginning with Abram, the first thing he says was, get up and move to the land that I'll show you. And he said, I will bless you in that land. And then he said, I will extremely bless you in that land. And every time he comes to Abram, and then to Abraham, he expands it a little bit. The covenant evolves in Abraham's mind over time. For one thing, it would be a lot to dump on Abraham in the very beginning about what the end covenant actually was. But God allowed him to ease into it step by step along the way. Okay, so for you and for me, our vision and our destiny in Christ is something that has evolved over our lifetimes and will continue to evolve over our lifetimes, and it will change and it will develop as we grow. Word that the Lord spoke to me, oh heavens, probably 5 or 6 or 8 years ago was, the best is yet to come. And that's kind of become a byline. I've shared that with Dr. Wayne several times. The best is yet to come. because it's something that the Lord has spoken into my heart, knowing that of all the things I've done, I've enjoyed my life. God has blessed me top to bottom, inside and out. But really doing things that matter, things that are aligned with my destiny in Christ, the best part of it is ahead of me, not behind me. And which a lot of people my age have a hard time grabbing onto, but I'm excited about. Cast vision. Okay. It evolves and grows over time. Allow it to do that, but keep it fresh, keep it moving. Okay. Second thing that leaders need to be always doing is creating culture. Okay. Create an atmosphere. Dr. Wayne talks about the atmosphere a lot. And so that's what we're talking about. Create an atmosphere that encourages people to have high standards, to get to keep themselves pure and holy, to be helpful to one another, to love one another, to share with one another, to have grace and mercy, to win people to Jesus. All that's part of the culture that he very, very diligently has created and continues to create and to develop. We'll talk more about culture later. But when people have this similar mindset, when all the people in a group have the same understanding of who they are as a group, why they're there, and what their specific positions are, what their contributions are, they're led by their heart, okay, not by their hands. And so it is so easy to lead that kind of people and to help them to grow and develop. So uh, it's a huge thing. It really defines what an organization is. The third thing is to develop subordinates, to be able to lead them to a place, lead them to the place where everything is flourishing, where they flourish, where they are on a consistent path to their destinies. A lot of times leaders will actually do things that they should be giving to other subordinates to do. If they want the job done right, do it yourself is sort of the thing that they will fall back to. But it's really not the best thing to do, because your subordinates need to grow. They need to feel trusted. They need to feel like they can grow into something. People love to grow. So as you help them to grow, then they will really respond to that. Okay. Uh, Many times you're making decisions that you should pass on to them because you're helping them to grow into being good decision makers. And so I'm not saying I'm going to try to say which ones are, which ones are not. Those are things that you need to walk out in your own wisdom and in your own positions and in your own relationship with the Lord and those people around you. The fourth one, communicate. And after you've done that, communicate. When you've done that, communicate some more. Uh, just about everything I've ever read on leaders, by leaders, for leaders, that's been a critical part of it. Communication is people work hard at it. The successful leaders work very, very hard at being good communicators. Okay. You'll find some people who will inherit a position, or they'll have a lot of money and people start listening to them because they have money or power. But communication is really the foundation. People need to be drawn together. That's how vision gets communicated. That's how subordinates are developed. That's how culture is communicated. Communication takes a lot of forms. It can be things you write, things you say. It can be the way you act. It can be the way you dress. It can be the way um, whether your beds are made. That's a communication thing. Having a tidy atmosphere and environment that you work in, of those things that you have direct control over, is a way of communication. The kind of car that you drive, you know, all those kind of things communicate things to people. They symbolize and represent things. We'll talk a good bit about communication more later on, but work hard at it. Work hard at it. Be honest and keep people informed. Keep people on the same page. If we begin to develop these skills before we have leadership responsibilities, then they will be natural to us when we do have those responsibilities. If we develop those skills early on in our leadership lives, the cream will rise to the top. As we develop these skills, we'll find that we are setting ourselves in a position to be promoted. Because the Lord gives promotion, but He gives promotion to those who are able to carry it. Okay, and this is one way we can prepare ourselves to carry the promotions. Okay. Here's one that I personally do not like, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But it's absolutely critical. Plans, budgets, and schedules are the roadmaps to vision. We can have vision, we can have goals, we can have all kinds of things laid out before us, we can have them in our minds, but if we don't have a pathway to get there, if we don't have our own GPS system that's saying this is how to get from point A to point B, then we're not going to go anywhere. We're just going to sit in one place, kind of staring at the road around us and not moving because we don't know where to go. We don't know how we're going to get there. Okay, so we need to have those plans. We need to have those budgets. That's good. Now, that doesn't mean they're absolutely set in concrete. We can't change them. Uh, I am constantly frustrated because I will be traveling somewhere and I'll have a route that I want to go. And I know I want to drive through this area and look at these kind of things, look at this scenery and things like that. And my wife will talk and I will talk about that. Let's go this way. Yeah, let's do that. And I'll set my GPS to follow that, but then I look at later on and I think, well, why am I on this road? And I'll look at my GPS has changed the route that, that we had plugged into it. I said, this is the route I want to go. But somewhere the GPS thought it was smarter than I did and knew it all like better than I did. And so it would change the route for me. So I've learned to be careful with that. Uh, I also use GPS that don't do that. Sometimes it's very valuable because the GPS can tell you, well, there's a traffic slowdown, there's a wreck ahead, and you can avoid it by going this way, or you may be sitting and waiting for 20, 30 minutes or something like that. Or it says, yeah, let's get off and have a bite to eat or something while we're waiting for that to clear up. The weather's bad, or whatever else kind of thing. There's a policeman on the road up ahead. So watch out for that or whatever else. It'll tell you kinds of things that can be helpful too. So our plans and our budgets and our schedule are things that can be fluid a little bit, but we need to have those things. Now, why I don't like those is because personally I have a very short attention span. And the process of developing plans and budgets and schedules, um, sometimes it can drive me absolutely bonkers because I just could force myself to sit down and actually do it without stopping and doing something else. It's a real discipline. It's a real discipline for me, but it's critical. I've learned that I have to do that along the way. I don't do it as well as a lot of people do. Most people can do it better than I do, but I've learned that it is absolutely critical for me to have those plans, budgets, and schedules to do that. And honestly, over the last couple of years, I've worked harder at that than I've ever worked in my life because there's more at stake. There's honestly more at stake now. A poor worker blames his tools. Okay. Uh, you have to own everything. I've got a book that I really like. It's written by a couple of former Navy SEALs, the elite special forces of the Navy, and these guys have had a remarkable life and done some remarkable things. Again, some of the most elite warriors in the world. Uh, but one thing the leader of the group learned early on was that he had to own things. He couldn't deflect. He couldn't pass the buck. Blame and accusation, deflection, those come from the adversary. God didn't teach us that. That's not the Holy Spirit that's doing that. If we're blaming, if we're deflecting, if we're passing the buck, if we're accusing somebody else or something else, then we're failing as a leader. Even if it's something that's absolutely appropriate, you know, even if the equipment failed. How was it the equipment failed instead of working when it should? What could I have done differently so I wouldn't have this problem? How could I have been prepared for this problem ahead of time? Okay. How could I make sure I have, instead of blaming my tools, how can I make sure I have the right tools in good working order? And sometimes things get in the way. And we really can't help that kind of stuff. Sometimes we have power failures. My internet's down, been down for 2 weeks. Okay, sometimes we have problems that we have to figure out how to work around it. I heard one guy describe it this way. He said a leader, a good leader is a kind of person, if somebody driving down the highway pulls up and runs a person off the road into the ditch, instead of getting mad and getting into a road rage thing, we'll say, what could I have done differently to prevent that? Could I have, why didn't I see that coming? Was there something about the way that I was driving? Did I not pay enough attention to the traffic around me? How did I not anticipate that? How to not drive in such a way that that never came up in the first place. And that's owning the driving thing. Now, that's not something I do real well. I pay a lot of attention to the traffic around me and work with it. But I kind of expect everybody to drive the way I want them to drive too. So that's my confession. I've confessed my faults to another, so you guys know me. Um, Never throw anybody under the bus. Never, of all the people that are working with you, people that are your subordinates, people who look up to you, don't ever throw them under the bus. Don't ever do that. That's one way to disqualify yourself as a leader very quickly. You'll lose whatever authority, whatever status you have. Which leads us to the next one. And Dr. Wayne talks about this one a good bit, but I want to dig into it a little bit more. I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I preach to others, I myself should become disqualified from 1 Corinthians 9:27. But what did Paul mean by becoming disqualified? Okay. And do we have a biblical example of that? Well, we do. And sure enough, in the class we talked about it today, the example I have was the same one in the class was of Moses, who was disqualified from leading Israel into the promised land. But we know what he did. He struck the rock in anger instead of speaking to the rock. And the Lord honored Moses' action, but then took him to the side and said, listen, I told you to do this, but you did something else and did. Instead of speaking to the rock, you were mad at them. You're mad at the people for not trusting me, and you took that anger out on the rock and hit it. Okay. And instead of trusting me, instead of doing what I told you, you took it on yourself to do something and act in anger. And because of that, you can't lead them into the promised land. Joshua's going to do it for you. Okay. Now, why did that one little thing of whacking a rock with a stick disqualify him? Okay. Why was he disqualified because of that? Well, let's look at it for a second and see. Because that's not the first time Moses had reacted in anger. Way back when he first left the desert and went back to Egypt, or maybe it's before he left Egypt first. Anyway, he realized that he had a Jewish heritage. No, he had an Israeli. There weren't any Jews then. He realized that he had an Israeli heritage. He realized that the slaves were his brethren, and he saw an Egyptian master beating him, and so he stepped in and killed the guy, and then he buried him and kind of went on his little way, hoping people really hadn't noticed. But then later on, a couple of guys were fighting, and Moses stepped in there and said, "What? You're gonna kill us like you did the Egyptian?" And all of a sudden, he lost status. And so he already had that one situation where he had kind of lost face by what he did by acting in anger and getting a little rash. But now he did it again. Okay. So all of a sudden there's this thing in Moses. Can we really trust him? Because they're fixing to go into the promised land, and they're fixing to enter into some of the most trying times that they've had. Before, all they had to do was basically survive. Okay. It's been doing what they were told to do, following Moses, following the cloud, following the pillar of fire. Because now they're going to have to put their lives on the line. Okay. The Canaanites were not going to just say, "Oh yeah, here you come, have our houses, have our lands, have our cities, have all of our riches, and we're good. We'll go find somewhere else." Not a bit. They'd been there for generations, hundreds of years. They were going to sell it dearly. Okay. And so the leadership needed to be unimpeachable. The leadership had to be solid. But Moses had this thing to where at some point he could have made a decision, and the people, even one person, one bad apple in the whole group, say, "There goes Moses again. He's flying off the handle." Yeah, can we really trust Moses? Because he's got this thing about kind of flying off the handle, losing his cool. Are we going to destroy all the people of this city just because Moses got mad about something? Yeah, I don't think so. That's not fair. You know, this is Moses kind of acting out again. And all of a sudden he was disqualified. When he would need to have this clear, trustworthy sound coming from him, all of a sudden there was a place that he could be questioned. Okay. And it only would take a few people to question that for that to whole spread out through the whole nation and cause serious problems. And so, yeah, he disqualified himself, just like Saul disqualified himself when he looked to people and the witch of Endor instead of looking to God and Samuel the prophet. So yes, we can disqualify ourselves. So we need to stay on top of things. We need to be circumspect in all things at all times. People are watching in any leadership position. The higher the leadership position, the more people watch. It doesn't matter what level you are, even if you're just providing some direction to a work group that are all your equals, they're still watching you. They're still watching. Okay. So we've got to walk in balance. Okay. We've got to walk in balance. We've got to walk in balance. Uh, Self-control is a fruit of the spirit. Okay. And Moses kind of lost that and it cost him. Um, they don't know, they don't care what you know until they know that you care. Leaders have a hard time giving direction unless people listen. If they understand that you value them above what they can do, they'll likely be more like be loyal and be responsive. You know, if they know that your heart is for them and they're not just tools in your toolbox, they're just not machines in the great industry that you're pushing. If they're not just they're not tools for your agenda, you know, if they're not just cogs in the machinery, if they know that they're human beings and you care about them, they will respond. If not, you can shout orders all day long. They may respond, but not because they want to. They'll respond with their heads and not their hearts. Okay. But if they know you care, then just like with the small rewards for the things you found them doing right. Yeah, he cares. She cares. Yeah, well, I'm on board. I like it here. This is the foundation for building culture. We'll talk more about culture later. But you wanted to start building a safe place for your people where they're at peace, where they're at rest, or where they can put everything they have on the line without worrying about anything. Okay. Now, here's sort of of a question for us. Two different kind of phrases that we see here a lot. Birds of a feather flock together. When people are all similar, when people all are like one another, they tend to hang together. Versus opposites attract. Okay. So we have the similarity, everybody's similar to one another, versus or the diversity where there's people with the differences kind of put together. Do we like one better than the other? Well, the truth is we really like both, but each one has its place. We'll look at the base. We'll look at the basics here. We'll really get into it deeper later on. But for now, we'll throw in another one. Two heads are better than one. The diversity thing, okay, bringing in different kinds of mentalities, backgrounds, capabilities, values, and those kinds of things. Different personal characteristics where people just see things different, have different things they bring to the table. And so if we're kind of seek information, trying to make plans, if we're trying to figure out how to get a job done, trying to the best strategy to do something, two heads can be better than one, but a two-headed leader is a monster. Okay. And so two heads are good when we can draw information, where we can process information, where we can make plans and strategies, and those when we can build consensus within a group and kind of get people buy-in because their voice is heard. Okay. People will buy into something and be part of something if their voice is heard. So they can those are all things where the two heads can be better than one, but there needs to be clear leadership. Okay. So the leader can delegate, but still needs to lead. Collaboration can be hugely valuable for planning and strategy. But to progress, we need unity and a unified vision. Now, the flip side of that is too many cooks spoil the broth. Okay. If you get too many hands in it, then all of a sudden it turns into chaos, turns into a mess. Leading by committee doesn't work. Okay. Collaboration is helpful, but people need to hear that clear sound. So delegate when it's important, get input when it's helpful, but be sure the leader still leads. And sometimes the decisions may be passed off to somebody else, but it's clearly it was the leader that passed the decision on. You know, my job is to take care of this. You guys figure out how you're going to, my job is the whole organization. You guys figure out how to do this part of it. My job is to manage the whole thing. You guys figure out how to take into to the street ministry you're well prepared for. What do you think is a good tactic for this? Okay. How do you think is the best way to get from here to wherever you're going down the road? Darwin, Perth, Singapore, wherever. So there are the decisions you need to pass down, but it's still you're the one that's intentionally passing them down. So think about any comments, questions, or anything else you have. Homework. I was going to ask you to kind of kick in something, so these things are really worthwhile for you to kind of maximize, make the best out of the time we have. But come up with some proverbs or street smarts, different kind of sayings on your own and how they apply. Come up with some ideas of your own along the same lines. Write down some takeaways. Any thoughts, impressions, any ideas, anything that kind of clicks with you, anything you disagree with, anything that you say, I don't really get that. We can chat about those. Okay. Find one thing that you can actually use over the next week and give it a shot. Give it a shot. Try to put it in place. Okay. Like making your bed. Except for that's from last week. You got to keep doing that this week though. Make sure it's simple and specific, something you can look back and check it off. Something that's very, very definite. Okay. I'm going to make my bed every day this week. That's pretty definite. That wouldn't be a good one if we hadn't already done that one. Okay. And remember the replay videos we posted on YouTube channel, Diamond Management, the designation. My wife couldn't find that, so I told her to look up at Diamond Management 9311. So, oh yeah, there it is. And so that's how she found that. Okay. Bless you guys. Sorry that I didn't have the live session recorded. Again, I totally screwed it up. But I really appreciate that you guys are patient, forgiving. I really like working with you guys. I was talking to a friend yesterday. He's been a friend for 30 some years. Another retired now professor, brilliant guy, and just a wonderful hearted guy. But we were chatting yesterday, and I told him what I was doing with this and with this class, and he says that's such a good thing. He says anything you do for God will be rewarded. I said, well, I know that. But the thing of it is, I love working with you guys because and I told him, I love doing this because in all the years of my teaching, I've never had a group that was so engaged, so responsive, participated so well. And I really had things to throw in and things to give, things to add to it. So thank you so much. Have a great week. And we'll get back together next week live again. And I will try to remember to record it again instead of dropping the bomb this time. And bless you guys. Have a good week. Now, I've been praying for the guys on the road too, and for their tent setup, things like that. So I'm with you. Bless you guys. Bye.